All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hello and welcome to the Free Press Live, coming to you from the Free Press newsroom here in Midtown Manhattan. I'm Michael Moynihan, and back with me finally after her lazy week last week is opinion editor at Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon. And we have a great show for you today, Batya. It is, America's about to collapse into fascism. So what are we going to talk about before everything ends and we all end up in camps? Well, despite that, Franny Blanc will be here to talk about the debate over school choice. It has people crossing party lines in Kentucky. And the great Jay Solomon, who is now with us here at the Free Press, is going to break down his reporting on a demoted senior Pentagon official with alleged ties to Iran, raising questions about the Biden administration's vetting process. And Batya and I are going to do the thing that we always do, which is check in with the legacy press, i.e. the people who aren't us and the people who get paid and work in big newspapers and stuff. And we have some very funny and interesting and weirdo bits from CNN and the Washington Post this week, because as always, they are covering themselves in glory. But first, there is a presidential race, and thankfully it will all be over next week. Batya, where are we? God.
We are officially in endgame.
Yes.
We are now less than 1 week out from the election. Over the weekend, Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden, and yesterday morning he spoke to the press at Mar-a-Lago, where he focused on illegal immigration. Let's take a look at a few clips.
So I know we talk about inflation and the economy, but to me, there's nothing more important than the fabric of our country being destroyed by people placed there, violently placed there, as far as I'm concerned, foolishly, stupidly placed there. I think what's happening on the border is the single biggest issue.
And last night, Kamala Harris gave a speech that's being referred to as her closing argument in Washington, D.C. There was a lot of time devoted to casting Trump as an evil and divisive threat to democracy. She did talk about policy for a few minutes, specifically price controls. She mentioned that, and she mentioned a few of the other things that she had been promising, did not go into detail. Here is the extent of her policy proposals from that speech.
I will enact the first ever federal ban on price gouging on groceries. Cap the price of insulin and limit out-of-pocket prescription costs for all Americans. I will fight to make sure that hardworking Americans can actually afford a place to live. And as president, I will fight to help first-time home buyers with your down payment, take on the companies that are jacking up rents, and build millions of new homes.
Okay, Michael, so here's my take on closing. I watched both speeches in their entirety, and almost everything that Kamala Harris says about Donald Trump is not true. She accuses him of wanting to implement an abortion ban, which he has promised to veto. She accused him of implementing already Trump abortion bans in which there are states where there are no exceptions for incest and rape. That's false. She accuses him of wanting to eliminate Social Security. He has promised to protect it. And she accuses him of wanting to implement a 20% tax on imported goods. That's not how tariffs work. Meanwhile, everything that Trump says about Kamala Harris is true. She was the border czar. She did say that aliens in detention should get trans surgeries. She was part of the administration that oversaw record inflation. She oversaw a coup against Biden. She lied about Biden's mental fitness, and she was part of the disastrous foreign policy of the Biden administration. And I think the most important question for people who are still undecided, who are very upset about the foreign policy disasters and are very upset about immigration is, do you think Kamala Harris is going to fire Alejandro Mayorkas and Tony Blinken? Of course she's not, which means we're going to have 4 more years of the same thing. And I think that what we're really seeing here is an election between people with real problems and an election between people with fake problems. Donald Trump is representing the real struggles of downwardly mobile working class men. And Kamala Harris is representing a made-up struggle, an abortion ban, which will never happen, to make rich women feel like they are part of an oppressed category. And that is my final take on the end game here, Michael, which is that the side that is lying is the side that is losing.
So this is your final argument.
This is my final argument.
Final argument, none of which surprised me at all. I will say one thing. I mean, I disagree with some of the stuff, and let's not get bogged down in those details. But I will say this, is that, campaigns can really make your head spin in the sense that when you see people, and I've seen this a lot, and to your point, I've seen this a lot on the Harris side, saying things that they know aren't true. I mean, people that are journalists, I mean, I saw a journalist from the Washington Post retweeting something about someone at the MSG rally who said that we just slaughter our opponents. And I said, well, good Lord, I can't believe that they're saying that. And no one's been talking about this. And of course, you look at it and it's like people of my generation, when you talk about sports, you say, oh, they slaughtered the other team, right? And it was just like, we're going to win, it's going to be a landslide, we're going to slaughter them. And it's like, wait, you're with the Washington Post, and at this point, we've all gone so mad that we're taking these things out of context because it doesn't really matter. It's all about vibes, in a way, not just the Kamala Harris vibes, but the vibes about Trump. This is something that his people would say, right? And that's the same thing when you see things like, a comment that Trump made that has been repeated ad infinitum about I think it was about cars coming in from
the
Mexico.
Auto industry. He said
it was the bloodbath.
He said if we allow China to build car manufacturing plants in Mexico, then there will be a bloodbath. And of course, he was talking about the auto industry specifically, which is, might I say, completely accurate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I disagree with that, but the thing about it is
it was reported as.
It's funny because we're in this era of hyper polarization and hyper partisanship. And we apparently talk about that in tone gravely about it. We need to get beyond this. Yet we see the conversation that we're having about this race, particularly like dictator on day one. Nobody's going to stop talking about it. If you see that in context, it's a dumb comment that is essentially saying, and nothing, by the way, he says is dictatorial. He's like, I'm going to, do signing statements and, executive actions on the first day, which since George W. Bush, which really, we've had this for a long time, but he really inaugurated that new era of, the power of the presidency and people doing that. Trump has done it, Biden did it, and Obama too. But it's an incredible thing that people say, can't really skate by this. I mean, this was in the conversation with Anderson Cooper, this town hall. She said a million of these things. Nobody stopped her and said, well, not the bloodbath thing. I don't think it was that one. But there's a number of these things always. So, if you have any faith in the mainstream media still, which I don't know why you'd be watching this if you do. You should be watching those dumb things on CBS, ABC, CNN. But you see the way these things are abused. And it's like the second, obviously Donald Trump gives them so many opportunities. He's endless with these opportunities. And I just saw the MSG rally was another version of this. To me, this was another one of, he's like Bob Dylan. He never stops touring. He's out there, even when he's president, he was doing rallies. And there's another one of those. But this desperation in this last week, it was a Nazi rally, right? It was a very, very funny, and I advise people to go look at those old downfall memes, Hitler and the thing. The funniest one I've seen is like people, this is a great one, look this up, where there's all these Jews at the rally flying. It's like, this is a Nazi rally, and this is what it's going to look like in 2023. But yeah, I think this whole process has been so depressing. And I take this separately from the politics of it all, from whether we're going to end up with a Donald Trump presidency or a Kamala Harris presidency. I just watching this broken process of people telling us that they're out there on our side combating misinformation while spewing things that aren't true. This is something that is really dispiriting to a lot of voters and a lot of people in our business too. I have talked to people who were saying, like, really, who the fuck do I believe at this point? Because all these things that are said about either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, I think less so about Kamala Harris for one reason. And I'll finish on this thing because, Donald Trump says she's a communist. She's not a communist. Come on, stop it. That's ridiculous. But there isn't a chorus of people within the mainstream media and a chorus of people within mainstream politics backing up this claim, right? There isn't. You're not going to find that in the New York Times. You're not going to find that in the Wall Street Journal. Maybe there'll be some people on OAN or some of these networks. But when you have this idea that 65, 75 million people last time around are voting for a Nazi, are voting for a fascist. I mean, really? We're at this point? And that's something that's being echoed by the New York Times and being echoed by mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN. And then to end it all, Joe Biden says, your voters are garbage, right? I mean, that is literally deplorables 2.0. It's just the whole tone of this election disgusts me in a lot of ways.
So there are 2 points I want to make. I think you raised something really important and interesting, which is that the powers that be, the institutions in America, have proven very good at standing up to Donald Trump's abuses of power, alleged abuses of power, desires to abuse power, right? Mm-hmm. They have proven very bad at standing up to the Democrats' attempts to abuse power. In fact, they have been their handmaidens in doing so. And so for people who feel worried about what Donald Trump will do with power, I would say it is in the nature of power not to give up more power, not to give it back to the people, but to try to consolidate power. And look at who our institutions have proven good at standing up to and who they have not done so. On the second point you made, I think this is so important. Barack Obama keeps getting up there and saying, Donald Trump is an authoritarian, he is a threat to our democracy, he is the worst person, he is a racist, right? Which, as you say, implies that all of his voters are completely comfortable with that. And then he said, Obama goes, why is everything so divisive? Why can't we come together? Do you think you're playing a role in it, in calling half of the country willing to vote for a Nazi? And I think Kamala Harris has stepped into the same thing. She says, to her credit, she says, I want to be the president of everyone.
She did that last night.
I want to unite. She did this last night.
Yeah.
It's great that she says that. But then she goes on to demonize the half of the country that doesn't want to vote for her. And I think that this is so crucial and so important. It's such a great point that you made.
Yeah, no, I thought that last night, watching that rally, it's eye-glazing, because they always are. It's just a repetition of all the tropes that one would expect. But the fact that she did do that, I thought that's not something Donald Trump ever does. It's something that she did do because if she were to win the presidency, and by the way, I think this is a real coin toss.
That's actually not true. Trump has said that he wants to be the president for everybody.
I think his rhetoric is a lot sharper. I think that's pretty obvious in a lot of ways. But I think that with her last night just saying that, and again, I think this is really a coin toss election. I mean, I think that the Trump people are getting a little too over their skis in this and being very, very excited about this. This could turn in any direction at any time, but if she does win this election, this is going to be a restive population of 75 million people, and she has to be, the leader of all those people, and I'm not sure that she can do that at this point, so.
Because of her rhetoric around.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing that's so frustrating about it is we expect a certain level of sharp rhetoric in politics, and we always say, in a kind of, we throw this sort of tossed off comment, that we shouldn't be talking like this. This shouldn't be the way that politics is handled in America. I'm not so sure about that, but we have gotten to a point where it is so crazy, the Bush-Hitler stuff. And if you're old enough like me to remember those times when George Bush was, marching his SA troops through Manhattan in these protests with the war and stuff, that was not something that you saw within the mainstream. It just wasn't. It was something that protesters held up. They would take a bit of electrical tape and put a little mustache on Bush and be like, har, har. It was the fact that it's really seeped into the mainstream. And it's not to say that Donald Trump isn't a uniquely divisive figure, and I cannot stand a lot of the rhetoric. I mean, I think it is completely out of bounds, saying that CBS should be shut down, their license should be taken away because he didn't like a debate. That stuff is really terrifying to me. But at the same time, there is a special place that we hold for things like Nazism, for the Holocaust, saying we put in camps. This stuff, I think, has gone way too far. And because certain people want to win an election, and they think the way of doing that is scaring people, that we have minimized the impact of these words. And then all of a sudden, my question is, if these people at MSG for the rally are handmaidens to Nazism, if Donald Trump himself is a Nazi, what do we call actual Nazis? Super Nazis? Very, very, very Nazi types? I mean, the ones with the armbands, the ones that actively, deny the Holocaust, hate Jews, they deny the Holocaust, but they wish it happened, that sort of thing. What do we call them? I think the inflation of this rhetoric has had a really destructive, and look, I know people who complain about this. Donald Trump has been involved in this himself. I think the rhetoric that, I mean, we see him on Andrew Schultz's show, and Andrew Schultz is comedian, and the guy Akash with him says at the end, can you kind of dial down the rhetoric? And I thought that question was right. I was like, just for a bit, can we realize that we're in this kind of toxic phase of American politics? Can you do us a favor and not involve yourself? He finds it impossible. But anyway.
Well, it was very interesting because the press conference he had yesterday was in tone very different from the Madison Square Garden.
It actually was, yeah.
It almost like it was a corrective. I think, he also then later went on Sean Hannity, and he apologized basically for the stand-up comic and the joke about Puerto Rico that offended so many people. You could tell that he was really rattled by that and felt like, well, we're doing so well with Hispanic voters, which they are, because Hispanic voters, of course, don't see themselves as united by race. They see themselves as Americans and American citizens. I do think, I've been thinking about this a lot, I do think that a party that cared more about Jews would not be so fast and so quick to call everybody a Nazi, because that means something to us. Like that, the Nazis did one really, really, really bad thing, right? They did a lot of bad things, but one of them is the thing that made them Nazis. And it's the thing that, is why I only have half of a family. And I think there's something there that, I know that a lot of Jews still are voting for Democrats. I know that they don't feel the same way as me about this, but it does seem like almost, it's.
But if you want to find people in the streets of Manhattan shouting about Jews, you wouldn't have found it in front of MSG the other day, but I have seen it, and I've seen it recently, and they weren't Trump supporters.
Right.